Hey everybody, good morning. Welcome to class. This is going to be a really great video where I am going to show you my resume and we're going to pick it apart and make it better. So let's just dive right into it. I'm going to show you how to make a resume from scratch. And behind this tab is my resume. Voila. This is something that I kind of built several years ago. And, I have used it and just continuously updated it over the course of several years. And I was curious what Karen would think of this. So I showed it to her. And she said, I'd give it a B. And so I asked her for tips. I asked her for tips on how to make it better. And she walked me through some stuff and told me some style tips, some font tips, some design tips. And um, I loved every second of it. I thought it was fantastic. She is an expert on the subject. She actually wrote the book and she's working on another edition of it with more information. But I recommend you check out her book. She's very well researched on fonts and typefaces, as I'm sure you figured out from her lectures. That being said, I just wanted to show you that this is kind of it's all right. It's serviceable. It obviously got me a couple jobs. However, it is not ideal. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of like dive into why that is to start. And so if you hit W, it takes you out of the preview, right? And you can then kind of look in. And so these are glowing red because the font that I used, I love Avenir. It's a very thin, elegant font. I don't have access to it anymore, and I don't think you do either. They are constantly kind of swapping out fonts in the Adobe library, which is really, really annoying. But if you have like a personal device where you're signing into your OSU account to access Adobe, or you have a personal subscription, open up your Adobe Creative Cloud, go down to like fonts from the home page. Let's see, and you can go to like browse more fonts, and it will basically open this Chrome. Let me pull it up for you. It'll basically open this, and there's not a ton on here. There's a lot of fonts that I tried to download that you know aren't available in the Adobe library, but there are a ton of fonts that exist. And so you can like browse these and see if there's any that you are drawn to or you think are really nice. And basically, when you download them, it plops them right into this part of your Creative Cloud, and you can like dive in and install them, and then they're available instantly on all of your stuff. So I just, um, I think there's a lot going right here. I made a cool logo that sometimes is like able to pop an eye. I have a lot of information that's helpful, but when you really start to dive into it, you'll notice not everything is lined up with my baseline grid. You can see right here, like this title of the whole section lines up with the university, but then for my experience, there's because of the way I arranged it, I probably didn't even notice at the time that the baseline grid was snapping this down, right? So like this would probably read a lot better if it looked a little more like that, and things are starting to be in line, right? There's also not a ton of space in between my descriptions of each job. And honestly, I've probably used too many words to try and describe it. I probably don't need this much information. There's also a lot of important things to point out. I ignored a lot of the spacing horizontally, and that is just a huge, huge no-no. I don't know if Actually, I'm sure that Karen showed you this slide in the lecture that has like the proportions. I thought this was a beautifully helpful graphic, if I can find it, because what it does is it kind of breaks down the proportions of how your page is going to be set up. And as architects, we start to think in proportions and proportionality a lot, right? So let's see here. I believe I'm very close to it. Here it is, right here. So this was a former student's resume, right? Look at this proportion that's set right here, where by having like 6 columns, what you're actually doing is you're creating, if you think about the gutters as like half of a column, you're creating um, a series of like 14 mini columns, basically, where you have your 6 that are divided in half, and then a gutter on each end. So you get these really lovely proportions. And what we want to do is we want to mimic this. My resume doesn't look like that right now, but we're about to completely rebuild it in a new file. And I'm really excited about it. This is going to be a longer form video, but it's going to be really, really great when it's done. So that being said, let's start to dive into this. Spacing is off. The fonts aren't the greatest. Um, you know, it's kind of there, but it's not all the way. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to File, New Document. I'm going to make an 8.5 by 11. Sweet. And I'm going to create this. And so we have this document, right? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Layout, Create Guides, 6, and 6. This is how I want my document to be laid out. It's just a really, really wonderful thing. We're going to go to View, Grids and Guides, Show Baseline Grid. And so basically you can turn all of this off. You're toggling whether or not it is visible by just hitting the W key. Obviously, make sure you're not in a text box when you do that. But yeah, so what I'm going to do is you're not going to be able to see my screen, but I'm just going to pull my current resume off to my second monitor, and that's just so I can see the information that I put in it, and I will drag it back if there is something that you need to see. But for the most part, you will. This is for my own reference, so I can not be clicking back and forth a million times for you guys. I digress. You can edit the distance of the baseline grid. I'm not going to do that because I don't think it's super critical at the moment, but this I think is super helpful to kind of start with your title, right? So I'm going to draw a text box. I'm going to make it, I'm going to make it fit these 2 gutters, right? And so I'm going to enter the information before I start deciding what size I want the font to be, right? So my name, I would like to be all caps because it's going to be big, it's going to pop. And of course, we are not going to use Minion Pro. Absolutely not. I downloaded a font off of the Adobe Cloud that I really liked called Futura. And that what's great about this is that it is a font family, meaning that there are all of these wonderful variations of the font that we can start to play with and mess around with. So first, I'm going to bump up the font size. And so as you'll see, my name doesn't quite fit. So I'm going to drag this box down a little bit. And let's just see. It looks as though I am not using up all of the space, right? And honestly, my name does not have to be in this corner. I actually think it might serve itself better moved over one gutter. Um, and that is because I think it will be helpful to have like a centered kind of name going on. It might be better to have it stretched out like this, right? And so then what we can do is let's look at some of these. Let's just kind of like peruse. I almost feel like a darker font for the name. I want my name to be its own thing that is the heaviest thing on the page. I want it to be, here's heavy. What does that look like? And what you can do is you can click out and do this. See, that is fun, but I almost think that we can go bold. And there's also extra bold. This is a great font family. Because there's so many options. So this might be too much. You can see the letters are starting to get really thick, and I kind of like this font because it's a thinner font. So extra bold might be a little much. I kind of liked how heavy read. And what I can start to do is add these like sub characters below, right? So if I get out of here, hit this, I want to try and bump this up just a little more. You have to have stuff highlighted. And so you see my name doesn't quite make it. I'm also going to turn off hyphenation while I'm thinking about it. I hate hyphenation so much. It's under your paragraph settings. You do not want to hyphenate stuff, okay? Do not do it. Absolutely do not. Um, and so your name should be big, but it doesn't have to be the biggest thing. And honestly, now that I'm looking at it, what does it look like with lowercase? Sometimes lowercase letters do not take up as much space, and so that might get us right in that sweet spot at this. All right. So that's a very prominent name, right? It's a nice header. And what we can start to do is use this baseline grid as our guide by which we are building our resume around, right? Next thing I want to have is my contact info, right? For me, that just happens to be, first I'm again going to use Futura. And the reason is because there are so many variations of it. So many variations. I could probably make the whole thing with this one font family, if I'm being honest, and I might just do that. We're going to see how it goes. So let's do Futura. I'm just going to type my email, and I'm going to do all lowercase for this. Boom. And then a phone number is generally pretty helpful. And I love the way the numbers read on here. Send me memes, I guess, now that you have my number. um, maybe don't actually do that. But so as I look at this, I'm starting to feel like maybe my name is too long relative to this. And so we're going to experiment as we go on, but we can start to clean that up in a minute. What we want to start to do is grab like sections. And so what I can start to do is type. We probably want to start with education. And again, I'm going to type F, and that will take me to the Fs. Futura is in my recents. And we want this to be like a heavier font. And you know what? Why don't we, just because it's a like a header kind of thing, let's have it be underlined. Under our text options, go ahead and underline. Let's type education. Now, some people like all caps, some people do not. As I'm looking at this, I'm kind of not loving the way that it's underlined. And I wonder if that is just the font family that looks like that. But I wonder what this would look like if it's all lowercase. So this is going to be, we're going to hold this to this um, uh, margin over here. And we're also going to just real quick before we go on, we're going to grab all our text boxes and make sure that these are aligning to the baseline grid, right? That is just so critical for us. We want all our text to align to the grid. And so what that looks like here is that some of these are going to have to, start to get spaced a little funny because of that. Like they don't fit quite underneath themselves. It doesn't really look like that would be the issue. I think the problem is that there's a G right here. Like if I took the G out, I'm almost, yeah, they're leaving room for that. Those letters that like hang below to read there. If I were to shrink this font size, which I'm not sure I want to do, but just for the sake of the argument, if I brought this down to like 10, you'll see that they will fit under there. So what we've got, and we'll start to organize all of this as we go. Got education. I kind of think I like this to be capitalized. Education, right? Let's go ahead and copy this down to here. Next is experience. Do that again. Our experience is probably going to take up a lot more space, but on my old portfolio, or I'm sorry, my old resume, I had activities and skills and awards. I am the only thing in my activities section was being an AIAS member, which unfortunately I no longer am, as I am no longer a student. So I'm not going to put an activities thing, but you can. You're more than welcome to. Or if you have like a volunteer work that you do, if you work at like, if you do work through a community center or your local church or other religious institution that would do some sort of volunteering activity, that is like certainly something that you could put under like activities or volunteer work. But I'm going to put awards, and I'm also going to put skills. And so my experience is going to take up a lot of space, like a lot of space. And so I might not show it all just for the sake of this, but your resume can be 2 pages, like eventually, but for now I would try to keep it to one. I think there's many, many wonderful ways you can keep it to one, and so you should try and just make it 1 page. But as you go through life and keep working at jobs, you're gonna end up gaining experience to the point where sometimes you'll make like a CV, like a full resume, and that'll be like 50 pages long. So what I'm seeing here is I'm gonna move these down. And so these are snapping to the baseline grid, and they are fitting within the space that I've made. So we're starting to get something going here. Something's cooking. I don't like the gap that's happening here. And so what I might do right here is not have them snap to the baseline grid just for that one text box. But at the same time, that might make me want to bump it up a little more. And you can do that with the arrow keys. I don't really recommend that. You can see there's something happening here where it's not quite aligned, and I don't like that it is not aligned. And so I think perhaps like this title block will be the last thing we start to mess with. Um, because I am just not happy with it right now, and that's okay. It is a process. You guys are gonna be fighting demons doing this, okay? Because you're gonna start to regurgitate the information, and then you're gonna hate it. So through, repetition, you will discover that it's actually pretty good, and you'll start to love it. So I'm gonna again copy this text box that I made, snap it in here. Now, what I'm gonna do for education is I am going to, oops, sorry, I ended up making a new box by accident. I'm gonna grab this box, I'm just gonna extend it over 3 wide. I want all of my education work to fit within this space right here, right? I think that would be ideal. And so, to make that happen, we're going to keep the same font size, but I am not going to have it be underlined, I don't think. I'm thinking that there's a couple different ways to describe your education. I think it's best to lead with the university that you went to. You guys do not need to put your high schools on here anymore. Like, you're in college now. Maybe once you graduate with your bachelor's, you'll feel more comfortable without it. But so maybe have it on, maybe not. That's like a judgment call. But once you graduate, at least with your undergrad degree, do not put your high school on your resume. Like, no one cares. No offense. Um, who knows? Maybe you went to some prestigious high school that I don't know about. But what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna type in the Ohio State University. Remember to capitalize the. I actually did not have mine capitalized when I did this the first time. Kind of that might make people a little mad. I'm not sure. So judgment call on if you capitalize that or not. But the Ohio State University, um, and generally, you can put either the, how do I say this? The city that it's in, if it's not obvious, or you can, sometimes the city is actually pretty obvious. So if you want to be more specific, you could say like Knowlton School of Architecture. Um, However, I did not in my original, but I think I might now just because I kind of want to fill up this space. Let's do a dash. Knowlton. But you see, that's gonna, so I'm gonna run out of space if I add that. And I don't want to run out of space. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna keep it at the Ohio State University. Judgment call. And you know what? We're gonna keep going. Maybe that'll change. Underneath, what did I get? I got my bachelor's of architecture and my master's of architecture. So let's make a little text box. Let's see. So what I have and what you guys will be getting is a Bachelor of Science in Architecture. So click into this text box. I'm going to go to my recents, Futura, and we're going to keep it book. We're going to type science, architecture. I spelled that wrong. There is dynamic spelling that you can turn on in the settings if you want. I do not use it because I trust myself, but you know what? Maybe now that I'm saying that, so you go to view. Um, oh, where is that? Extras, maybe? Um, let's see. Layout. Maybe under edit preferences. Type. Oh, spelling right here and autocorrect. We're going to turn spelling on. Enable dynamic spelling. Okay. Boom. It never likes my last name, so that's how I know to do it. So, Bachelor of Science in Architecture. When did I got that? I got that in May of 2021. And so this is where we can start maybe our final column. And so over here, I would like to take this text box and I would copy it over. And this is kind of a judgment call. I might want to keep a little space here, so I might bring this over. So I received this. Commencement was May 2021. And so this is snap into the baseline grid. All right. Make again, just periodically go through, highlight everything, make sure they're snap into the baseline grid. Because when you copy paste your text boxes, it does not carry the properties over all the time. So let's see. For example, this text box got bumped down. So if I bump it up, it will snap into place right there. I actually want this to align down here, I think. And so much of this is subjective, guys. Just FYI. And then if you guys, obviously you guys are still in school, so you would put over here like expected May. Oh man, let's see. For you guys, that'd be May 2026. Oh, gross. You guys are so young. Now what's kind of annoying in InDesign is you have to stretch all your text boxes manually. Hitting enter will not do it. So then I received my master of architecture. I am legally a master of architecture. And this happened in May 2023. Now, as I'm looking at this, these dates feel a little far away, right? Let's see who we're working with. That feels a little far. So, how do we deal with that? There are a couple different ways to go about it. You can you can start to organize this information a bunch of different ways. Um, and honestly, I recommend going through like the examples of what other people did. I've always found that to be super helpful. Sometimes your uh, dates can be in your information. Sometimes your dates can be before your information. There's really a bunch of different ways to do it. And as I'm just kind of looking at what I did previously, hmm, this is tough. This is tough. I think that what I'm really wanting to do is let's take a look at baseline grid settings. I make these a little higher, just bump it up a little bit, to like 14 point, totally adjusts um, everything, right? But what that allows me to do is, well, it still is not putting that in. Huh. So let's bring my old one over. Take a look here. This, so I gotta redock this for it to show me my settings over here. This was a 12-point font, and when I hit enter, it let me fit that in. Oh, you know why? It's because I've adjusted the height to be 10 points. I bumped that back up to its native 12. It bumps it down. And so, okay, that's why that was happening. So instead of adjusting the baseline grid, let's undo that. What could be nice is functionally this text, right, is the height on it is set at 14 for some reason. But in reality, I think that text can be a little, the height of it doesn't have to be. If we set that to auto, it's 14.4. Now this varies by font, but if I set it to 12, that brings it closer together. That's interesting. I still am not loving this over here. So what I think we can do is hmm. Again, this might be just one of those things that we figure out as we go. And so I am going to, because what you could also say is the years that you attended school instead of just when you got your diplomas. Um, Definitely different ways to go about it. I did it a few different ways in my last portfolio and my last resume. And what I think helped was I had another text box like this. And like I said, you don't have to do this. So if I like shrink that text box, I put the location of where my job and school were. So if I put Columbus here, that fits real great into that box. And what that also does is it makes this feel a little more full. Also, bringing that in is kind of helpful, but I know we're not going to have that space for the experience. So these text boxes, I'm going to move back over here. And so that's a start. I can live with that for now. But what I think I want for the dates is I think I want our dates to be italic. So let's do, or maybe like a lighter font. Let's try a light oblique. That's starting to do something for me, I think. Um, that being said, let's enter some experience because that's going to look a little different than our university work, right? Um, obviously, if you have any like honors, so like in undergrad, for example, I graduated cum laude. Sometimes people enjoy that kind of information. If you have something like that, I would make this font smaller, maybe like 10 point. Um, and you can indent it as well. And sometimes you don't have to indent it. They don't have any sort of things like that for grad school, unfortunately, or else I would have absolutely nailed it because in grad school I had a near perfect GPA that I was very proud of. Not to flex, but okay. Let's So this font that I picked just so happened to be a taller font, and so you can drop the line spacing down from the auto settings to start to get stuff. Where this is starting to me, this is for me, this is starting to read a little better. Something that I also think could be quite tasteful is like I said, I made this logo. This is just something that I threw together, essentially with two. I didn't quite click on them. Copy, click in here, paste. I basically just took two letters and adjusted them. There's a way that you can essentially convert a letter to a shape in Illustrator, and it's the exact same thing in InDesign. You can actually do it in Illustrator and then just copy paste it in, and it will keep those characteristics, right? So this is like an editable shape. But I like the proportions of this, and so I can group these together so they move as one. Um, and for now, this is just gonna hang out over here. I can scale this to a certain proportion, and I am going to keep it like that. Um, how does that look over there? See, that reads really heavy. That's huge. But I can align it to my baseline grid, and it starts to look a little better. But maybe it doesn't need to be in the corner. Maybe it wants to be over here. It's kind of hard to tell. Or maybe it wants to be right here. This is something that we're going to play around with. And I actually don't recommend having a logo unless it's really cool. That's so subjective, of course, but um, it's just something that uh, can start to really trip people up. And as I'm even doing that, that makes me want to kind of make my name maybe less heavy, maybe more like a medium. Yes, so like that starts to be a little nicer, but that also is that tempts me to start to move this back over here, which I think might be more ideal. Let's take a look. I mean, that fits in that gutter pretty well. Comes right up to that margin. Oh man, this this will feel a lot better with some experience down here. So let's see how this goes. Um, ignore ignore that for now, the logo. So I've kind of started doing a thing. I've got a little system where these are underlined and these aren't. And so what I can do is start to drag that down. Alternatively, like I showed you in the last video, you can use paragraph styles to, like if I set this text, and I want this to be, let's see, new style, titles. Then I were to like, take this and make it titles, then it changes all of them. It does not look like it changes the font size. It only changes the um, actual font and how it's used. So I might do that over here as well. Go ahead and make a new paragraph style. Dates. And then here, what we're going to do is my experience right now. I'm at architecture firm called E. Hall Sampson Beats. And my title, I guess you would say, is an architectural associate, right? So what you can do is I'm going to copy this text box down here. Go ahead and line it up. And I'm going to say I'm architectural. And so then underneath this, I can use this smaller font, which is 10 point, right? Go ahead and hit enter. Well, sure, be sure every time you do this, if you're having this problem, you can go ahead and adjust that height. Use different fonts or these fonts. Just make good judgment about it. I think Futura is a great start, and you can download it from the Adobe library. Calibri is another wonderful font that has a lot of really easy access. So try Calibri, try mixing fonts, but be careful about it. Look at Karen's lecture slides. She has a lot of really wonderful information regarding fonts and mixing them. Okay, going into it, I'm an architectural associate, and I start to just like enter information about what I do. Illustration in CAD. I also I have experience working under architects. I have I have field experience. I'll say field/site. You want to be pithy in your descriptions. And if you're unfamiliar with the word, you want to be quick and succinct with the words you use. You don't have to have a ton of text. I mean, really, I am cooking this from scratch right now. So, as you guys will be. I did this job. I used my last resume to get this job, and I have not kept it updated because I'm not planning on leaving. So this is it's coming together. Feels like experience, and what else? What else do I do? Experience working with clients. Say illustration and design in CAD and Revit. Mostly CAD at my job, but it varies. And so that's like great. And so this is slightly larger text. This is also in Columbus, Ohio. If you, it might be better to put your the location of where you work. If you've worked in a bunch of different cities, I have lived in Columbus my whole life, so all of these will say Columbus. So for me, that might be a tad bit redundant and a little reductive to have this several times. So instead, what I could do is your education section and your experience section do not have to be the exact same, right? So let's say that what is going on here? I started this job in May 2023 to present. And you have to do these settings for every single text box, turn off hyphenations. May 2023 to present. And I am using this my dates style, right? So what is this starting to look like? Flipping back and forth is super helpful. It might make more sense for me. And again, you guys, this is something that you're just going to work through. I'm just kind of taking you along for the ride right now. It might make more sense to, just depending on how wide your text starts to get, your descriptive text. Like this is starting for me to feel like really far away. Like all of this content could probably move over. See, I'm starting to feel like that is a little better, but obviously there's a lot of white space over here, and white space is great. It's really just about making a balanced document, and thinking about it in ways of those proportions that I showed you earlier. And so another option would also be to potentially move or like bump everything over a little more. Imagine if this was all bumped. What would that look like? If we had like a whole empty column. This is interesting. This could be um this could be tasteful, but I'm not sure I love it. This is I hope the process that you guys are going to be going through while watching this is there's not one correct answer. um, but we are going to keep plugging away with it. Actually, you know what? This Now this could be quite nice. These start to let's align this to the baseline grid instead of this could be tasteful. This could be very, very tasteful. And what I'm almost tempted to do is make the dates a little longer because I don't want the present to be I don't want those to like fall in on themselves. This I might like a little more. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna run with this and we're gonna see how long these text boxes start to get and see if they interrupt us. So I have more work experience. So what I can do is I can kind of grab these text boxes. I can just highlight everything, copy, paste, and just again line it up down here. Um, just keep it with this baseline grid and be mindful of these guides and grids are definitely more for like your larger moves with how you're organizing things, holding axes and stuff, as opposed to like this. Technically, I'm typing in the gutter that's running horizontal right there. That's fine. That's okay. Um, I also obviously work at the Ohio State University. And my title is lecturer. And so what do I do? Teach uh, architectural representation. What kind of experience does that come with? Um, experience giving lectures, uh, running labs, right? Um, uh, individual and group instruction, course, and content creation, right? And so you can start to see that that started in, for me, that was August. So I'm going to bring this text box back. August 2023 to present, right? How's this starting to look? This is starting to fill up. We're starting to get some space in here. Now, it's interesting. It's interesting the way this has been broken down. Um, in my head, some of my, I thought maybe my text would have uh, gotten larger, and maybe like grown further, but I'm not I'm not really changing a whole lot. Um, what I am gonna do is I might, hmm, you want to fill this with like experience more than most others. Um, kind of thinking through this design. Do I like this layout? Also, something that's helpful is the information that you add uh, is very, very um, subjective to what you're applying for. So, for example, I have worked, my very first job was selling popcorn at Clippers games when I was like 14, right? Um, that's not relevant information here. I was a youth pastor for 6 years at my church, like on staff. That is not relevant information for applying to like an architecture job, but it might be more relevant when applying for like a teaching position because you're kind of, there's a little bit of overlap. You're like getting in front of groups of students and telling them about stuff and teaching. Um, so like if you're applying for an architecture job, list all of your architecture experience first, right? And then do it chronologically backwards, right? So like what's most, always start with what's most recent and then go backwards from there. And if you're working at like the golf course nearby your house as like a caddy over the summers. It's like good for you. I hope you're making bank. But if you're applying to an architecture position, that might not be the most helpful thing if you are strapped for space. Like I'm probably at maximum only include like 3 different jobs. I'm gonna make sure they're all like related to architecture, and that just so happens to be my 3 most recent. But if it wasn't, I would maybe like cut something out. Like I'm not going to include my graduate teaching assistant job on here. Instead, I'm going to use the last architecture firm that I worked at. Does that make sense? Um, yeah, there's a lot of really wonderful ways that people can start to show their names, and I almost wonder if there is a better way. I'm just looking at this and thinking, perhaps there's a better way. I ask myself, is this text too close together? I actually don't think it is, but I know that was something that um like Karen was able to see when looking at my other resume. She looked at this and said, your body text looks really close together. And so like when I click out of here and hit W, oh, I gotta dock it again. Apologies. When I get this in here and hit W, like this text is kind of like right on top of each other because the spacing is for 10 point. So in this one, I have it set to 12 point. It reads, the font is smaller and I have it set to 12 points. So it reads a lot better. That's like very helpful advice. So let's just like hop in here. I might just copy some of this text. And what I can do, I also used like the same text boxes in here. That's like not always the best. Um, I can copy just the text. Actually, you hit Control C, highlight what you want. So I type this, Control C, come in here. I did this backwards because I want another text box down here. With these same settings, text box. And I go over here, Control C, and then I can paste and it will format. Oh, I'm sorry, it's paste without formatting. That will not bring the formatting with it, right? So I worked at Berardi Partners, and then what I can do is I can copy this body text down here. When you're showing a job that you don't work at anymore, what you can start to do is, so here I was an architectural intern. I'm going to copy just what I said over there, just for the sake of time. Don't want to keep you guys too long. Architectural intern. And I want to paste without formatting. The delete key deletes word words that are in front of the cursor. The backspace obviously gets rid of stuff that's behind. All right. I just want to clean this up a little bit. And so this I worked this job. Let's see. I know it ended April 2023 and it started February 2022. You don't need specific dates. Oh, I spelled it wrong. There we go. Oftentimes people just want like the general months that you worked. And that is like totally fine to do that way. So like, let's look at this again. So we're seeing architectural firm, Ohio State, architecture firm, relevant information about what I did, the dates that I worked there. These dates are in line with the job title, not the location. That's just how I'm formatting it. There's different ways to do it. I have all my dates. The reason I did that was because I kind of started with my education doing the dates for the degrees. Um, so this is kind of tasteful. I kind of am enjoying this. Now what we can start to do is you can see the awards would overlap, right? So what I might do is I might move some of this down. I could, you know, if I took this information here, bumped it down like 2, took this information here, bumped it down like 1, that spreads it a little more, but we want this to kind of read even, right? So what if we line this up? So what's nice about the baseline grid is that you can literally like count your spacings. So experience 1, 2, title, blank, title, experience, 1, 2. So I moved these down 1 too far. Title, right? But this doesn't quite go all the way down to where we want it to be. So what we could do is actually say we want this to be 3 in between each. Experience 1, 2, 3, title, experience 1, 2, 3, title. And that kind of brings us closer to the bottom of this grid. So when we get out of this, it looks a little more spaced out. However, uh, proportionally, it's starting to take up more space. There's a lot of white space that's really nice. And what we can do with our awards and skills is we can start to like, a lot of times these categories are kind of thought about differently on resumes. And so I would put awards next and see how much room that takes up. And so for me, I won some things, some studio awards. I was a guy competition finalist, and I had my work featured in the Banvard Gallery. So I can basically draw a text box. And I want this to be F. Sure. I'm just gonna put these in. Ooh, paste without formatting. And then what size font do we want these to be? Kind of the end of the resume is what I believe to be the tough part personally. Um, if you, hmm, I think there is a way to like squeeze this information in. You could start to even, what we might explore is if we bring just this over, right? Because it does look admittedly a little funny with that big gap right there. Bring this over. What we can do is make these spread a little more. Maybe use like commas to break up the text instead of new lines for everyone. Or even just like word our stuff differently. If we did that, and then we brought this up, maybe like we have two, let's say we have two spaces in between each one, and our goal is to use like 2 lines. This is just something that as you go through it, you're going to be like, oh, that looks weird. Maybe I don't like it this way. And then you'll like something for like most of it. And then by the end, you're like, actually, now that I'm looking at that a little different, this has like one word that's coming over a little extra, but I'm sure that's honestly fine. What we could do, let me want like, what did I say, 2? And let's grab this text box, make it longer. And so we're almost there. We are so close. Oop, we want to not hyphenate this. And I'm being like real skimpy on the text. Um, but I think it's tough because the education kind of don't need all of that space. This is starting to read more like it's like, oh, hey, this is a real resume that's coming together, right? Um, and what that also means up here, just now seeing this content would get moved over. We want all that to align. And so all of a sudden this corner piece becomes like a kind of like an anchor that's holding this thing down. Um, Also, I just realized we want our bottom. Okay, good. I have it set. My bottom margin, I want it to be 0.75. Hmm. So it's really just like absorbing. I don't know if I love it, but it is a start. And I think that I may. It's tough. I almost think the dates should go up. And obviously that makes the education a little more complicated. And it also begs the question, do you have to do the exact same thing um, for your experience that you do with your education? And so I don't think that's necessarily the case. Um, I do love this um, format, but I'm almost wondering if it is better like right there, where it's like, okay, the education and experience are a little closer. They're still snapped to the baseline grid, but these verticals are what's really critical right here. That's what's getting kind of like called out. Um, and what that also does is that gives us the ability to throw in like awards right here. It's a list of awards. Um, all of mine just happen to be from, you know, Ohio State. And I don't need to like list an explanation for each one or anything. I might have them. I wonder if there needs to be a title there. See, it's so subjective. It's so subjective. Let's see. Also, with the skills, these are not gonna read exactly the same way as the information that you list for um, your education or your experience, of course, but it can be quite tasteful if you start to use it. I think I like this spacing a little better just because um, master my master of architecture doesn't have like a line, like a subline under it, so that spacing felt a little large. Um, skills. They're more than likely going to want to see technical skills, not necessarily like I'm a great communicator. It's like I'm sure you are, guy. Like, but do you know Revit? Do you know Rhino? Uh, Rhino 3D, Revit, CAD, Adobe Illustrator, Adobe InDesign, Adobe Photoshop, V-Ray. And this is that thing where it's like, okay, you could probably start to like list stuff. Like, I don't think a paragraph is the best way to format this information because you're trying to show them as much stuff as possible. So I'm here using commas when in reality, I think what could be nice. Mm, this is tough. This is tough because I kind of would love one more line right here. So I think that even just getting rid of this one and adding a slash. But you know what? See, I was duped a little bit because this happens to be, oh, I think I got rid of my window by hitting tab. That happens sometimes. This is hyphenating, which is super annoying. It will get you every time you'll think you have something all done. This other and with a slash. And then what I can do is move these up. You got to be kind of thoughtful about it, right? Boom. And then this will have that two spaces right there. What would be really ideal is if I can get this to just two lines too. Let's see, illustration, modeling. This is just like a little hack is getting rid of ants. I'm saying, so for example, I'm kind of saying the same thing twice here. So boom, and then that kind of like solves our problem for us. These can go back into their sweet little boxes that they want to be in. So we're only going to break that rule with our experience header, and I think that is fine. Because that proportion isn't super obvious, but down here it reads a lot better. And I'm thinking personally that I'm going to have my skills before my awards as I'm looking at it. So I'm going to start to move these around just a little bit. And I know the baseline grid isn't quite aligning with your guides as they go down. That is okay. It is totally fine. I have awards down here. We're going to drop this down one. So I'm going to give actually little subheaders right here. Skills. I'm going to put software. Or technical. It's another way. And then like if you want to put like other things you are good in, you can. I recommend software and hardware would be probably like a couple good like headers. If you do like I can operate Fab Lab machinery, and I think that's like a valuable skill that if a firm has like hardware, then I am able to operate that as well and be of value. And it also kind of like starts to break this up a little bit. So Rhino 3D, Revit, CAD. I'm gonna say AutoCAD. Adobe Illustrator. You could, um, depending on how much space you're working with, what you could do is say like Adobe Suite and it covers all of them. It depends on if you want more or less space. If you want to make it seem like you're better at more things, then I get it. You know what I mean? Like it's valid. You could, or if you're trying to flex, you could have um, two columns of stuff, right? So I have a lot going on here, so I might make this say the Adobe Suite. That kind of just like blanket covers everything. I'll add like Enscape. If you know Maya, that's another one. Chaos. It's like there's some software, and then I can copy this over uh, here. Let's say what do I do? I know how to operate laser cutters, 3D printers, CNC routers, and that's fine for now. Really what they care about is your hardware. Then under awards, if you have like a general place that you maybe are receiving these awards, all of mine are from Ohio State. So just flexing it one more time, the Ohio State University. Um, and honestly, that looks pretty good. Not ideal that the the dates kind of taper off, right? And so it feels like there's some empty space down here, which I kind of want to do something about, right? Um, so we just kind of think, how do we do that? So maybe instead of the Ohio State University, we say the Knowlton School of Architecture, right? And we can start to balance out. These are already in order. Oh, I just thought of another software I know. That's okay. And honestly, just kind of looking back and forth. If you just have like from when to when you were making you were getting these awards, say like for me, this was like December 2020 through like um oh man, probably yeah, I mean January 2023 until I win more awards that are not related to the Knowles School of Architecture. So there's just a couple more things I want to tinker with. The first being my name. I can't change my name, as you know. That was given to me by my parents. But what I can do is maybe play with the font size of it. I'm gonna drop this down a little, maybe. This I want to make larger. And I kind of want to see what a larger font looks like. Something that starts to take up more of that space. The logo might be bad. It's hard to say. It might work better smaller, or maybe holding down this over here. You know, the logos are tough. Logos are not necessary, you know. Um, what I kind of like to do though is play around with my name. So I think that the name being smaller might be a little better. And what we can do, and I like to do this a little bit in the preview space just so I can really see. I want to play with my leading and kerning for um just the two letters that start my name. I like to make them just a little bigger than the rest. That's just me being silly. That looks kind of stupid though. I did this when I would have everything capitalized. So this was 129. I think that looks kind of hideous actually. Let's do like 110. Get the F at like 110. And I think maybe I want this to be like a little bolder. Or you know what? I think bold is not the solution. I think maybe dropping this down to 75. Actually, no. It's the space between the letters I want to change. Let's start to maybe get my name to read a little closer to itself like that. what we might do, since it's the title, I think it's not unreasonable to maybe make it fit a little different in the baseline grid. So this might be bad advice, but I'm going to make my title and my logo line up with the guides that we have set and not the baseline grid, because those are not always in agreement with themselves. So I'm going to get real into the weeds here. Make this just like that. This end gets really sharp. It's very interesting. And I'm curious what these would look like. Then these can read directly underneath. You know, I think I like it. I think I like it a lot. So start to play around with it. Try and get there. I know this was a long video. It's a lot to think about, but we'll be walking around and we're there to help. So give it a go, and I'll see you soon. Peace out, guys.